Back in the first year of my middle school, there was an infamous girl that everybody ignored. She wasn't bullied, but nobody talked to her or would have anything to do with her. Let's call her Nari. She was so petite that she still looked like a primary school girl. Slim, pale, and big-eyed, she wasn't half as bad looking. I heard that she was poor, living just with her granny and a younger brother, but none of these were the reasons she was ignored. Nari saw the dead people. She had no friends so far as I knew, but there was another rumor that backed the claim that Nari's grandmother was a famous shaman and ran a temple on the hillside of the town. So Nari was always alone and usually spent lunch breaks in the school library reading books by herself. I knew this because I was occasionally on duty of a librarian because I belonged to the book club. We occasionally exchanged a word or two in the library, really mundane things like when the book should be returned or the order the book hadn't arrived yet, etc. But that blew out of proportion, and before I knew it, I was rumored to be Nari's friend. One day in June, 3 older girls came down to our classroom during the lunch break. At the time, senior students had a very hierarchical attitude towards the younger students, so the whole classroom went silent. 3 girls were huddled together like 3 kittens in the winter morning and asked one classmate who the girl named Nari was. Suddenly, another classmate pointed at me and declared, "He's a friend of Nari's, you should know." 3 girls came up to me and said they should like to talk to Nari for something important. The girl in the middle was looking like she was about to cry and was clearly shaking, and I could not tell them that I wasn't a friend of Nari's. So I said that Nari should be in the library and led them there. The library was in the separate building with the music and art studios, so there weren't many people around during the lunch break. As we were heading towards the library on the 2nd floor, I heard a strange noise. Sounded like teeth scratching on a glass. Maybe somebody's fixing something somewhere, I thought. But the girl, who was already shaking, let out a moan and collapsed on the spot. The other girls seemed confused. "What is it? What's going on?" I had to join to support her. She got moving again, but she had clearly turned blue. I already sensed I was getting involved with something bizarre. Nari was standing in the hallway as if waiting for us. Her usually blank expression was now hard and sharp, as if glaring at an enemy. Her eyes were almost all white and scary. You may think however furious a little girl could be, but it was beyond the normal angry girl. I fell on the ground as soon as I saw her face, and strangely so did the frightened girl in the middle. Nari approached us. As scary as her face was, I could not take eyes off it. While I started shaking all over, the same strange noise was heard from behind. It was much closer now, and also sharper, as if scratching on a metal. The girl in the middle stooped over and started crying. Her friends became dumbfounded and were shaking together. Glaring white-eyed, Nari screeched in a much higher pitch than usual. It sounded like that of a baby, yet it roared like a horn. "Why have you come here, silly girl?" As she roared, the scratching noise suddenly stopped. It became so silent that it felt like the hallway fell into a different dimension. Nari took out a bunch of white cloth and walked past me to the girl in the middle. "You can't eat it, silly girl. I won't let you. I'll rip your limbs off if you tried." Her manner of speech was that of a baby playing cute, which made it even creepier. The girl in the middle was still crying, and the other two were totally overwhelmed that they could only mutter to themselves, "What's this? What the heck is happening?" Nari glared at the girl in the middle a while, then snatched her left hand and started wrapping the white cloth around her wrist. The frightened girl resisted at first, but then let out a shrill scream. I saw what she was looking at. The white cloth was turning yellow as soon as it touched her skin. Looking at that, Nari said, "You are playing tough. Do you want to die again?" She finished wrapping the cloth up to the rest of the girl's arm and turned to look at me. "You heard that too, didn't you?" said she. "Heard what?" "The noise of ghosts approaching. She'll first take this girl, and then you." I didn't understand what that meant exactly, but knew enough it was serious. I was already terrified if that scratch noise should be heard any time soon. Nari turned to the crying girl again and said, "Why did you go there? The dead is more dangerous than the living, and you destroyed a shrine. She's gonna kill you." The girl held on Nari's feet now and begged to save her. Meanwhile, the once white cloth wrapped around her arm had now turned to almost brown. "She's coming back in the evening. You'd have to meet my granny if you'd like to see the morning sun again." With that, Nari turned around and disappeared into the library. Rest of us supported now almost fainting girl back to the classroom. I naturally could not eat anything for lunch and could not concentrate on anything for the rest of the day. Fortunately, probably because Nari was sitting in the same classroom, there wasn't any further noise. I wanted to believe it was all but a short nightmare, what I experienced during the lunch break, but seeing Nari all frowned up and mumbling something to the air shattered that faint hope. After school, I called my mom to tell her that I might be late tonight, but Mom, as soon as she heard my voice, said in a low voice, "Do everything Nari's grandmother tells you to. Your dad will come and pick you up when it's all done. Don't worry and stay focused." Soon the girl in trouble came to join us alone. The other two girls got too frightened to be further involved, understandably. Her eyes were all puffy as if she'd been crying all the while. I tried not to look at the cloth wrapped on her arm, now turned almost black. It took only about 10 minutes to Nari's home, but it was through the back street that I'd never been to. We passed through a row of little houses, each decorated with bamboo sticks wrapped with colorful pieces of cloth or balls. In front of Nari's house itself was a faded lotus lantern. Nari had us wait outside the gate and came back with a bowl of something. She told us to take our shoes off, which we obeyed without a question. Then Nari withdrew a couple of kitchen knives and told us bite on the blade and not to say a word. Nari's eyes were shooting fires, and again we dared not question anything. "Now keep quiet and follow me in," said Nari. As we stepped into the yard, She sprinkled some white grains about our feet. Considering how sharp the grains were, I think they were sea salt crystals. And just then I heard the noise again. The gate that had just closed behind us was now rattling. I froze stiff for the fear that something might snatch me up from behind. Nari's expression turned terrifying and shouted in a baby voice, sprinkling sea salt on the ground. "Here's nothing for you! Piss off, silly girl!" The metallic rattle of the gate got even louder. As my head turning back to have a look, Nari screeched in my ears, "Don't look back!" All I saw was a glimpse of Nari's white eyes, now all bloodshot. Those 10 steps' journey across the yard felt like forever. Once inside, we were led to a big room which had a faint smell of incense in the air. Small golden statue of Buddha was adorned with flowers and candles, and next to it was an even smaller statue of another Buddha. Behind them was a wall full of colorful painting of yet another Buddha. Nari let us go of the knives we were holding in the mouth. The corners of the girl's mouth had got red marks, as she must have been biting on it hard. Her eyes were red again too, as she'd been crying. Nari's grandmother, with neatly combed hair and sharply arched eyebrows, must have been tattooed, I presume, appeared and instructed us. "Listen up. You two are now going to hide in the pedestals and keep absolutely quiet. Even if you hear something, you mustn't come out. And even if somebody calls your names, you mustn't answer. When it's all done, I'm going to open the door myself and let you out. And you," grandmother pointed the girl, "while inside, you must pray for forgiveness and that the poor soul of the dead pass on to heaven. Be sincere, otherwise it would be all in vain. Pray as your life literally depends on it." Grandmother's voice to her was sterner than when she talked to me. We were given a short toilet break, and then each put into a separate pedestal, which was basically a long and low cabinet where the statues of Buddha were sitting on. Inside was dark. June night in Busan was already muggy as in summer. I could feel drums, candles, and other usual stuffs used for shamanic rituals stored inside. Crouched in the dark, my mind was running all directions. I could hear more and more voices outside. Some guy was talking and some women. They were discussing what to put where, what they should be bringing out, as if preparing for a ritual. But the discussion carried on a long time without anything actually starting, and I dozed off despite of myself. I was brought back by noise of gong and drum, so close I could feel their vibration on my skin. The voice, sounding like I believe to be that of Nari's grandmother, was chanting something to it. I could not make out what was said behind the wooden door, and I just assumed the ritual must have begun. The sound of the ritual faded in and out. It was somewhat of relief that nothing more weird was happening, but my mind got busy again. When this was going to end, if I could go back home that night at all, and I wished I could have just kept dozing until it all ended. Then I heard, first somebody sobbing. I thought it should be the girl in the next cabinet crying again. And then it was small and from afar. but it was unmistakably the noise. I was instantly alerted, but could not move a finger because I was afraid any movement may trigger it coming closer. The cry from the other side of the cabinet got louder, which in itself started getting on my nerves. The gong and drum outside seemed to go further away, fading out. I was afraid if they were leaving me alone here. Was the ritual finished? Could I go out and check if that was so? As the gong, drum, and chanting of the grandma's voice completely fading out, the girl's crying got louder, and ever-present and ominous quiet scratch noise. And then, "Stop it! I'm sorry! I'm sorry!" I heard a faint scream of the girl in between her sobbing. Suddenly, all sounds stopped. Was it over now? Had her plea moved the ghost's mind? I listened out for any further sign. Then I realized Nari's grandma instructed us not to utter a word. All at once bursted a noise, an ear-ripping scream. I covered my ears and clenched my eyes shut. When I opened the eyes again, I realized I was a whole mess of tear and snivel. Then, right at the cabinet door, and it got louder and felt like the noise was from scratching out inside of my skull. I could not but glare at the door, shaking as if something was trying to get in. I stopped myself screaming by covering my mouth, but couldn't stop crying. And with the sound of myself crying, the noise got even louder. My nerves could not stand the tension anymore, and fainted. When I got around again, it was still dark around me. Was it finally over? Was I just left here alone? I stretched my arm to touch the door of the cabinet. I felt something. Cold, sticky, and supple, like human skin. My mouth dropped with a shock. Had I not remembered Grandma's instruction to keep quiet, big scream would have followed. A woman was staring at me, crouching down in front of me. The mass of hair was long, and the skin was as cold as icy water. And the eyes, those eyes. Beneath the forehead was just 2 empty black holes. Seeing me looking at her, she smiled, as her bloody red lips parted, revealing white rows of teeth. But no, they weren't teeth. They were maggots. Wriggling maggots poured down from her open mouth and onto my knees and feet. The sound of them falling down, the crawling sensation of them on my skin. I wished I could rather die. The woman seemed enjoying my reaction and disgorged more maggots. Then she hung her head down and covered it with her hands. For a short moment I found a little desperate solace that I didn't have to see those black holes of eyes. I fainted when I realized where the noise was coming from. The woman was scratching inside of her skull with her finger through her eye socket. When I regained my consciousness, I was out of the cabinet. I saw my mom crying and Nari standing apart, staring. The girl's parents were screaming, holding their daughter with scratches all over her body. She had done that to herself in the extreme tension and panic. I returned to school, but not the girl. Nari told me later that the girl hung around with her gang around the shrine and happened to set fire to it from a cigarette light. The shrine was dedicated to a woman who died young before her wedding, and the fire destroyed it completely, memorial plaque and all. She said she wouldn't have helped her had I not brought them to her. So, what changed your mind? To my question, Nari didn't say anything, but smiled, looking at me. This is what my friend experienced when he was 18. Life in the last year of high school is a tough one. He was on the way home as usual at 1 a.m. after a long day at school and after-school lessons. The lift arrived that would take him up to his flat. Strangely, he didn't feel like to hop on it. Something was holding him back from going back home, he felt. But what else could he do so late in the day, and another long day at school and after-school lessons waiting after just a few hours sleep? He opened the door to his flat on 10th floor. The strange feeling only intensified as he walked in. The space felt bleak. The only source of light was the blue lamp in the fish tank, so he just blamed the darkness. Then he saw a person standing in the balcony looking in, shocked, but soon relieved he was to see it was his mom. "Gosh, Mom, you scared me. You closed the shop earlier today." His mother ran a shop and usually came back later in the early hours of the day. He just went into his room, changed his clothes, and popped in the kitchen to grab some snack, and found a memo stuck on the fridge. "Dear son, you didn't forget I'm going on a trip with friends, did you? In the fridge are the meals prepared, just warm them up." Ah yes, so she told him that she wouldn't be in tonight. But... He quickly looked over the balcony. Mom was still there looking in. Mom? He stopped himself in the middle. She looked like Mom, all right, but a blank stare at him was chilling, and the eyes were inhumanly large. He felt all the strands of hair standing on ends. That's not human, he thought. That's not Mom. His father worked in a different town and would come home for weekends only, and his older brother also went to university away from home, leaving him alone at home. All his instinct told him to get out of there. He sidewalked towards the door, never losing the sight of the thing in the balcony. And it also didn't lose the sight of him, just turning its head as he moved away. He was scared to death if it would not rush towards him right next second. As soon as he got out of the flat, he sprinted down to the ground floor. Heart was jumping out of his mouth, but he never stopped listening if it wasn't following him down. Only then he realized he didn't have his phone on him, was barefooted and in pajamas. Having no other options, he walked to the concierge's office. He looked up at his flat, only to find it was still looking down at him from the balcony. He was all tears by then. With the help of concierge, he called the police and his older brother. When the police arrived, the flat was empty. Everything was exactly as he left, with lights on in his room and kitchen, and no sign of intrusion. And of course, police wouldn't buy the story about something looking exactly like his mom, but not his mom. Meanwhile, his brother also arrived. He expected his brother going ballistic for calling him in at that hour for non-issue. But what he said was, "So you saw it too?" His brother's story was, when he came back home previous weekend, the flat was empty as mom was at the shop and the younger brother was with the friends. He was out to fetch some cigarette and snacks and back. He too sensed something was off the second he entered inside. He had left the light on in the living room, but now it was off. Just the television was still on. He switched the light on and saw his mom standing in the bedroom looking at him through the door opened ajar. "Whoa, Mom, are you pranking or something?" But it didn't take long to realize something was terribly wrong. He looked up at her again, and the eyes weren't humans. They were all white with only tiny dots of pupils. He couldn't move or think while his mind was shouting, "Run away!" Just then, "Hey son, what are you doing there?" It was Mom just entering the hallway. He looked around to find his real mom. "What's up? Are you not well?" Mom asked. He quickly looked back at the bedroom door. Now he'd have to save Mom if that thing should attack her too. There was nothing. He entered the bedroom. Nothing. Windows were locked, nobody hiding in the wardrobe, nothing under the bed. Mom didn't take him seriously, just brushing everything with, "Are you ill?" "Is our flat haunted?" the older brother said. The brothers looked at each other in silence. They spent the rest of the night at a 24-hour internet cafe. A year ago, I was in the last year of high school. To make up the first 2 years which I had spent carefreely, I worked really hard in the last year towards the big day of SAT. It was during the finals of the first term. The following day I was expecting tests for 3 subjects. One of them was English, my favorite, so I worked on the other 2 subjects first and saved English for the last. But when I finally picked up English, I realized I forgot to bring some of the important textbooks from school. Shit. English was too important a subject to give up. Time was heading to 9 p.m. and it was getting dark, but I had no other option but going back to school. My school is consisted with 3 buildings. The main block, plus 2 separate extra buildings were on each side facing each other. My classroom was in the extra building. Empty school at night is a spooky place to be. The only light source were from the street lamps outside and green light from exit signs. I somehow could not shake off from my mind the images from horror films I had watched. When I managed to get to my locker and took out the all-precious textbook, I happened to look out of the window and at the opposite building. On the 5th floor of that building was the gym. And in there, through the window, I could see something. It looked like a person, but it moved strangely. I just kept looking at it blankly. It was the curiosity before fear set in. Should have resisted it and just ran out of there then. Then I felt it saw me looking. I could not clearly see it, but sensed its eyes meeting mine, and also that it smirked. Fear started creeping up finally. But then it disappeared from the window. Thank God. The staircase hall of the building was cladded with 4 windows, and one could see the whole view of people walking up and down. And there, that thing was running down with an unbelievable speed. And now under the lights that came on with motion detection, I could clearly see that its joints from neck to arms to hands to legs, knees and ankles were all twisting and turning in grotesque angles as it moved. It moved so fast, I think it barely took it 10 seconds from the 5th floor to the ground floor, and now it was running towards the building I was in. As it got closer, I could see its body was black as if burnt out. Where the eyes should have been were 2 black holes, and lips were torn side to side, dripping blood. Only after seeing it running into my building, the flight mode kicked in. If I'm caught, I'm dead, was all I could think. I ran to the exit on the opposite side. I don't think I ever run so fast. Just before I threw myself over the stairs, I could not resist and took one last look back. That thing was already on the hallway through the opposite staircase. In the quiet, empty hallway was echoing the terrible sound of it moving, metallic, grinding, grating noises of its joints twisting and turning. My hairs all stood on end. I don't know how I did it, but when I could think again, I was out of the school ground. I looked back at the school, and there it still was. It was looking at me from the window of my classroom. I ran the rest of the way back home. Of course, I could not do anything for the rest of the night but shivering under the duvet. It was the first paranormal experience in my life, and I had absolutely no idea how to process it. After the sleepless night, I went to the school early. Tests were still real, and I thought to have a quick look at the textbook before the test. Suppressing the creeping fear, I went to my classroom, and in front of the door was my English textbook, which I dropped during the flight the previous night. I picked it up and nearly fainted. There was bloody handprint on it, as if somebody had grabbed it hard. I ripped the book into pieces and threw away in the bin. I, of course, ruined the English test that day. For the rest of the year, I could not even give a casual look at the window of the gym after dark. Thank God I didn't see it again, at least. This is a story from my mom's childhood. Her mother, my grandma, also recounted me almost exactly the same, and I believe that gives more credibility to this story. Korean War had just paused, and ordinary people like her family were just settling back once again to a normal life. Mom had lost her father during the war, but the small household of a grandma, mom, and a baby brother could somehow make the ends meet from working on the farming field they had. One summer evening, while Grandma was preparing dinner in the kitchen, Mom was looking after the baby brother in the room. Then she heard somebody calling her name from the outside. Suga! Suga! At first it was more like an airy whisper, and she thought she misheard it. But the voice soon grew sharper and irritated. Suga! Suga! Mom wondered if it was a friend and went out to the courtyard. What she saw made her gasp. Outside the gate was a woman, an impossibly tall woman. The gate to the house was not very tall, nevertheless her upper body standing well above the gate meant she was at least 3 meters tall. She was carrying a water bucket on her head and was breezily swaying her hips. And that thing was calling out her name. Mom, overwhelmed by the sight beyond the worst of her nightmare, dropped on the ground, but could not take her eyes off the woman. Summer evening light was bright enough to make out the features of the woman. Under the hair done in an updo with a hairpin was an elongated face, slitted eyes so narrow that she could not hardly see the pupils. Nose, mouth, and every feature was sharp, narrow, and stretched. Suga! Suga! Come, let us play together. The voice was gentle as the cool summer breeze, but the expression was getting greedier, like an animal about to catch its prey. Mom wanted to call for Grandma in the kitchen, but her dropped mouth could not let out a sound. Get away, you damned thing! How dare you come in here? Grandma was a tough woman who survived through the war and maintained her family. She jumped into the storage and fetched a broomstick made with bush clovers, then waved it in the air ferociously. Get away, you damned! Get away, or I'll whip you into pieces with this broomstick! The woman started moving away, creepily giggling, but her eyes kept staring at Mom on the ground. Even when she completely turned away, the face and the eyes were stuck towards Mom. She finally disappeared, but the giggle echoed around like a bad smell. Wait for me, Suga. I'm coming back. Dear, dear, what was that damned ghost doing here? What a disaster! What a disaster! Grandma said. She hastily went to the privy and scooped up handfuls of dirt around it, and then scattered it around the gate and the door. Mom only learned later that each room of a house are supposed to be guarded by the designated god, and apparently the god of privy is supposed to be most territorial. Dirt from the privy was believed to fend off passing ghosts for that reason. Then Grandma instructed as she handed over the bush clover broom to Mom. Stay put inside the room. Don't make noise and never ever come out whatever noise you hear from the outside. If that damned thing tries to come in, whip it hard with a broom. Understood? I must go and fetch the monk from the temple in the mountain. The journey up to the temple and back would take good 2 hours. Mom could only lock herself in the room with her baby brother, who was cluelessly asleep. She shivered and sweated at the same time under the blanket. Soon, night fell. Suga! Suga! Come out here, girl! The ghost's shrill voice rang out. Come
gonna get in to get you. Once I get in, then...
The teasing tone of the voice didn't hide a threatening intention. At least it seemed still shouting from outside the gate. Probably for the sake of her baby brother, Mom crawled out of the blanket and grabbed hard of the broomstick with shaking hands. The ghost went silent for a short while. Then the whole house shook for a second. Mom could instinctively feel the ghost was now in the courtyard. Indeed, her voice was now ringing closer, sounding even more sarcastic and teasing.
Sugar, Sugar, I'll take it to your daddy.
But soon it turned straight threatening.
You promised! I'm going to rip you apart. I'm gonna shred you.
Now the giant shadow of the ghost swept side to side on the paper door. Mom could only silently cry, praying Grandma to come back in a hurry. Then it was silent once again. Mom knew it was now about to get inside the room. Just then the paper door started shaking. The paper ripped open, and through the hole poked in a large and long hand. The hand swept all directions to grab the first thing that came to contact.
Where's the bitch? Should I stretch your face out like mine? Should I pull your arms and legs long like mine?
Mom had now no option but to fight. She whipped the hand with a broomstick and made a retreat. But not long after, the ghost pushed her head in. It shook side to side in a frightening speed and laughed deafeningly loud. Its eyes were shedding blood, and yet its mouth was laughing. And indeed soon Mom could not tell if it was laughing or crying. It was so bursting with anger and resentment that it froze the heart of even the young kid like Mom's.
I'm gonna kill you!
And then she heard the chanting of Buddhist scripture. Namu Amidaba Yada Tagada Yada Tiyata. Death is a part of life. There's no reason to be resentful. This world isn't the only world, dear fair maiden. Find your way to the next world. The monk's chant and rant continued in that fashion, and not long after, the ghost disappeared. Grandma rushed into the room and grabbed Mom in a tight hug. Soon the monk followed and patted Mom's head and consoled Mom gently. But Mom was too much in a shock to react to any of that. "Ma'am, hand me over the girl's skirt," said the monk. Grandma didn't question twice and followed the instruction. Monk said, "Let us move on now. You two come with us, little girl. It's not all over yet." When Mom calmed herself down enough, Grandma piggybacked the baby and grabbed the hand of Mom to follow the monk. He had hung Mom's skirt over the gate and chanted. He then asked Mom, "Where have you been around today?"
"I've been to the hill with the other kids."
Grandma sighed. "God, I told you not to go there." Monk's face turned dark. There are too many of them there. How shall we find it?" On that hillside was a major battlefield during the war, and many lives were lost on the spot, including civilians who were forced to labor. Adults had been warning village kids not to go there, but numerous bullet shells scattered around there were enough to attract kids. They walked the significant distance to the hill in the dark of the late night. Once there, Monk chanted what sounded like a spell to my mom's ears in a low and solemn voice. He walked around a while chanting on, then cried out, "There it is, there it is." Then Mom could hear the ghost's voice again, now mixed with crying.
I can't go. I won't go. You're killing me twice. No.
It led the monk to the exact spot. He said, "Time to move on," and mumbled on spells. Then he took out a small stuffed doll out of his sleeve and put it on the ground facing down. "Life is same way ever. Let go of all the dark and cold days, and may you rest peacefully in heaven," said he, and put his hands together and bowed solemnly. That was the end of the long and frightening day for Mom. The monk explained he'd worried that he'd have difficulty to find the ghost among many other wandering lost souls about the hill, but her resentment was so grave it actually made the task easier for him. Whenever Mom recounts the day, she still shakes all over as her trauma hasn't left her yet. I'm a man now in my 40s, and here I want to finally talk about what I experienced more than 20 years ago on an island I visited. I've never talked about it to anyone so far, but now that my father has passed, I figured it was time to recount before too late. I was a rebellious teenager then, but was excited for my dad's proposal to make a summer holiday on an island, a holiday for us 3 guys, including his younger brother. We arrived at a small port in Kohung on the southern coast. There we met up a boat owner who was said to be my dad's acquaintance. He took us to a small island untouched by usual holiday makers. The journey must have taken us a good 1 hour. I still vividly remember the horrible seasick I suffered on the way. The first impression of the island was a bit disappointing. There wasn't even a proper wharf, and the boat berthed at a rock formation whose natural shape landed itself as a crude wharf. The captain explained that there were now only about 50 people left on the island, all his own family and relatives in one way or the other. Just off the shore, the first odd thing I noticed was there were lots of stone walls as tall as a grown-up man. But once past walls, it looked like a typical quaint countryside village. Meanwhile, the captain was telling us that we should never venture out once the sun set, and not to mind the weird noises we might get to hear as they were just wind blowing through the stone walls. It only triggered my curiosity, but I soon forgot it all once we hit the beach. The sandy beach was empty except for 2 men who introduced themselves as the relatives of other villager. We got along quickly, and we all had a fabulous time, swimming, sharing food, carefree running along the empty beach. As the sun started setting, my dad, who didn't enjoy drinking, suggested that we should all now go back, as we might catch a cold in the night sea wind. Indeed, the tide was coming in to the spot where we settled, and wind was getting wilder. I don't know if it's my false memory, but I think it was also about then I started hearing a strange metallic noise. But the other two guys, having opened their cans of beer, insisted staying behind a while longer. In the end, just us three took our way back to the village. Dad seemed still worried about the guys, to which Uncle asked if we should go back to take them back, while I was so tired and couldn't think anything much. And then we heard screams from the beach side. We looked at each other's surprised faces a while. Uncle volunteered he would run down to check on them and that Dad and I would be better going ahead. We nevertheless waited on the spot. Time just passed on without any further signs and none showing up. I asked Dad if we too shouldn't go to the beach to search for them, to which Dad quietly pushed on our way back to the village. Dad said he should talk to the captain and I should stay in the room. Frustrated and curious in equal measure, I sneaked out and eavesdropped their conversation. They were talking about what they referred as the Demon-Ghoul. The captain's wife was saying that they must have been lured by the Demon-Ghoul and they should wait till the morning before we could go searching. Seeing Dad not protesting to that, he too seemed to have already heard about the Demon-Ghoul. I got mad to find out that they had no intention to rescue Uncle right away. I sneaked out by myself and ran down towards the stone walls. As my momentary courage out of fury subsiding quickly, all my senses became hyperactive like a little field rat sensing the near presence of an eagle. That strange noise was coming from the other side of the wall, which sounded like a mixture of a hiss of a snake and a wheezing of an asthma patient. I told myself it was just wind and carried on walking along the wall. But it didn't take long to realize the noise would continue even when the wind or wave died down. And then I heard something scratching on the wall. I froze still, and through the crack of stones I saw a black figure on the other side. Something snapped in me, and all I can remember afterwards is that I rushed back to the captain's house, screaming all the way. The whole night I shivered under the blanket, trying to dismiss the noise of the Demon-Ghoul in vain. Next morning, wind and wave turned mild, and there was no trace of the noise, as if everything of the night before was but a dream. The captain's wife joined my dad and I to the beach, but there was no trace of my uncle or the two guys, not even their footsteps. The wife sighed and said that the Demon-Ghoul must have got them. According to her, in the island was always the story about the demonic monster that looked like a human. It would creep onto the shore from the dark waves to harm people. The region of unusually high stone walls all around the village was all to fend off the ghoul. After hours of search on the beach, we came back empty-handed. The captain suggested that we should go back to the harbor to file the missing report. And the rest happened so quickly and mysteriously before we could grasp what exactly was happening. By the time we reported to the police and came back with them to the harbor to find the captain, he and his boat were gone without a trace. We didn't know neither the name nor the exact location of the island, and without him it wasn't possible to find it. We got around on the police boat several islands in the area that could be the one we visited, but none of them had that tall stone walls. In the end, we had to come back home with an empty promise of the police that they would carry on searching. A few years later, my uncle was officially declared from missing to dead. For the past 20 years, I privately searched around for an answer, but it yielded nothing. I still sometimes have a nightmare of me wandering underneath the tall stone wall, haunted by the noise the Demon-Ghoul makes. Could what I saw and heard that day be really true? Whatever happened to the island now, when its inhabitants were all shrunken elderlies 20 years ago? Might I be the only one left now who knows the island and its Demon-Ghoul? Only the photo I took with my uncle on that beach keeps reminding me of what happened that day. I went to university far away from home. I managed to get a place in the uni residence hall for the first semester, but for the following semester I had to rent a room at a private lodging. Rent in Seoul was much more than I expected, and I decided to seek a roommate to share the burden. But my small one-bedroom studio attracted no interest. Well, to be honest, who would really want to share one bed with practically a stranger? I was about to give it up when I got a message inquiring about the terms of sharing the room. The caller seemed pretty easygoing, but towards the end of the conversation she asked an unexpected question. "By the way, would you say you have strong tea?" I wasn't even sure what she meant, as I had never thought about strong or weak tea. But in Korea, when one sleeps sound, doesn't suffer sleep paralysis or see weird paranormal stuffs, and overall has lively energy, people often comment that such a person is born with a strong tea. I guess what they mean is one was born with strong enough energy to fend off casual interference of ghosts. Well, I had never had sleep paralysis or such, and I wanted to get a roommate above all, so I just said, "Yes, I think so." Unlike what I expected from the strange question, she in person had nothing unusual or weird about her, just rather quiet. So we agreed to become roommates. As her course started a bit earlier than mine, by the time I came back to the room, she'd been there about a week already, and I was a bit shocked with the changes she made. The weather was still summery in early September, but she kept all the windows sealed shut and draped them with black curtains. Her excuse was that she hated insects and needed to be totally dark to be able to sleep. She instead offered to take up the entire electricity bill so that I could run air conditioner as much as I liked. I found it odd, but just went, "Free electricity, yay!" We never really got very close or talked much, but otherwise she was a perfect roommate. She was quiet and tidy. She agreed to my terms without a single objection. She would volunteer to take on dirty or tricky parts of a house chore, like when we got a cockroach in the bathroom. I loathe cockroaches. But since my roommate said she hated insects so much that she had to seal off windows, I was thinking how to get rid of that hideous creature. But then the roommate, hearing my initial scream, came into the bathroom, rolled up some paper and caught it. "There, that's done," she said. I was confused. Didn't she say she hated insects? But when she took care of yet another dirty task for me, I didn't have a heart to bother her with my curiosity. One day, she said she was going to be away for a couple of nights to visit her family. I asked her that if I could invite a friend to stay overnight, and she agreed. So my friend came over and stayed with me. The following morning, friend complained she could hardly sleep with sleep paralysis and whatnot, not to mention the whole room felt too stuffy with sealed windows and black curtains. She further commented, "And why do you keep standing up and wander around throughout the night? That didn't help either." "What? I slept sound the whole time. What do you mean?" I said. "No way. If it wasn't you, then what walked around like a sleepwalker all night long?" she said. I just thought either she was joking or just dreamed it all. Nevertheless, when the night came, I felt a bit spooky to be alone. Probably for the reason, unlike my usual self, I had a hard time falling asleep till about 3 in the morning. Then I heard faint footsteps. So small I had to concentrate to hear it. I opened my eyes and saw a person in the middle of the room. I had left a half-empty bag of crisps on the table, and this person was eating it. "Who are you?" I shouted. She turned her head to look at me, but didn't respond, her mouth ever busy munching away. "That's not yours," I said. "Not mine," she said, and fully turned around, revealing a knife stuck in her chest and blood all over. And I woke up. I had never suffered sleep paralysis till then, and I assumed I must have had one. I just blamed my friend for triggering silly fear in me. In the evening came back my roommate. It was a rainy day, and as she walked in, she asked me the first thing, even before she folded her dripping umbrella. "You said you had strong tea, didn't you?" "What? Yeah," was my confused reply. "Oh, good," she said, and nonchalantly went into the bathroom. Now I started finding everything suspicious about her, but could not yet summon the courage to probe her further. In bed that night, I was all nerves for the fear of having that nightmare again. You may think I was too soft, and I myself didn't think much about it during the day, but once came the night and the darkness, the fear came back with it all at once. My roommate would sleep with her face completely covered either with a duvet or her long hair, which I'd been just assuming that was because she really needed it to be completely dark to be able to sleep. But that night it just added to my anxiety. And in the middle of the night, I heard her footsteps once again. I opened my eyes to find a person standing in front of the room. She approached me, revealing her face all melted down with a severe burn and a knife stuck in the chest, blood still pouring out from the wound. She looked at me and giggled. "I found ya! I found ya!" she said, and jumped up and down, clapping her hand. Then she pulled out a knife from her chest and stabbed my chest with it. I woke up screaming and crying. It was so vivid to be just a dream, and its fear was oppressing even after I woke up. The roommate asked me what was wrong, but for some reason I didn't feel like admitting I had a nightmare. The same night terror repeated night after night. I got so paranoid that I would be startled by hearing some random hand clapping. It was a pure stress just to think of going back to my room and have another night there. Into the second week, even my friends noticed something was wrong. I confided the recurring nightmare. Most of their advices were reasonable, but useless, like take a warm shower before bed, burn a lavender-scented candle, try a sleeping pill, etc. But one of them told me,
"If the ghost finds you by your face, why don't you hide your face from it?"
I was desperate enough to try anything by that stage, so I went to bed with my face covered with a duvet. The dream came again, starting with the same footsteps. But this time it was wandering all around the room, and it started screaming,
"Where are you? Where?
Then the footsteps stopped in front of the bed, and it whispered,
"Shall I open this one? Or that one?"
Then it sang some sort of kid's ditty, clearly a version of Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo.
Yummy, yummy Coca-Cola. Tummy aches if you drink too much. Ding dong, ding dong. Ask Dr. Know-It-All.
It ended with she picking my side. The ghost flipped my side of duvet, and the dream once again ended with me being stabbed. And so it repeated a few days. I was near the end of my patience. My roommate must have seen my struggle all the while, but didn't ask a single thing. Another night, and all the accumulated frustration and exhaustion was looking for an outlet, and it directed towards the roommate. It was because of her that I could not sleep, at least with a light on. This stuffy air with sealed windows must have contributed too. When I once again woke up from the footsteps in the middle of the night and saw my roommate sleeping soundly covered with a duvet, I felt I had it enough. So I flipped over her duvet and carefully brushed her hair off of her face. I felt a bit guilty, but on the other side, I was desperate to escape the nightly ordeal this single night. So I covered myself under the duvet. Soon, the footstep approached.
"I found ya! I found ya!"
It jumped and clapped its hand once again and stabbed my roommate. When I woke up and checked on my roommate next to me, she was glaring at me. "Did you have a nice dream?" she said. I was so creeped I jumped out of bed despite of myself. "Didn't you see a ghost with a knife stuck in a chest?" she asked. Yeah," I said. "Then why didn't you get stabbed by it as usual?" I was so shocked by the remark, I felt my knee giving in. I denied whatever she meant by that, but the roommate just glared up and down at me and started explaining it all, as if it was the most mundane story. The ghost was her older sister. They lost their father from a car accident. Her sister was with her dad in the car, but survived despite a burned scar on her face. Roommate and her mother blamed their sister for Dad's death, no matter how unreasonable that was, and bullied her, until she committed suicide 3 years ago. She stabbed herself, piercing through the roommate's photo on her chest. And since then, the sisters goes to the pier every night. But the roommate found a solution. All she needed was a dumb roommate to get stabbed in her place. It was so unrealistic a story that I don't think I really believed it at first. But I didn't have the dream at first, I said. Well, didn't you say you had strong tea? But seems like you've run out of it since the day of my sister's memorial ritual, she said. When the roommate was away for a couple of nights, that must have been for the memorial ritual for her late sister. I was all goosebumps now. How could you? You drove your sister to death and now using me as your scapegoat? I said. She laughed out loud. You didn't say anything, did you? When I took up all the bills and wiped after you all the while. You thought it was all free of charge. She carried on sneering at me. Then suddenly, with a stone face, called me dumb bitch. I was so creeped that I just excused I was late for my lecture and escaped. When I came back in the evening, she was gone already with all her stuffs. Could not reach her phone either. It took a long time for me to recover from the whole ordeal. I had occasional nightmares, but to my relief the ghost didn't visit me again. When I returned to uni for the next semester, I asked around and found out the roommate had dropped out. I don't think I would ever be able to live with a roommate again. Following story includes graphic description of violence. Viewer discretion is advised. It's already 5 years ago. I was a uni student then and worked as a part-timer at a local motel. I had to, of course, attend lectures during the day and didn't want to give up weekends to work either. So the night shift at the motel was a perfect option for me, especially considering the hourly pay was 3 times of what I would have got from working at a convenience store. The motel was located on a back street in the part of Seoul with a bustling nightlife scene. There were about 20 motels on that street alone, and they all made a good business. The owner was a tall, muscly guy with a pretty vicious look about him. I suspected he should be an ex-gang member or something, but he explained he used to be a judo wrestler. He realized his look scared clients away, so sought a part-timer to keep the front desk. Well, good for me. When I was first learning about my job there, the boss told me, "Don't give the key to the room 603. "Do you mean don't ever?" I said. "I mean, if there's any other room available," he said. That was a bit confusing instruction, but I was just a part-timer, so said, okay. Out of curiosity, I peeped into room 603 once too, but I didn't find anything unusual. A couple of months passed, and one Wednesday night, even though it was a weekday, the house was full, probably because it was pouring down in typical monsoon season fashion. A couple came in. The man seemed well over 40 and in a business suit, while the woman was much younger, probably about 25, and in t-shirt and jeans. It's not uncommon to encounter all sorts of unlikely pair-ups when you are in the motel business. Somewhat uncomfortable air, eyes avoiding to meet mine were the usual giveaway signs that it was not a proud affair. But they weren't that. I had never seen clients coming with such a dark shadow drawn in their faces as theirs. Man was so forlorn and serious, and the woman seemed she could break into tears at any second. And they both were soaking wet. Could they have really forgotten to bring an umbrella in the middle of a monsoon season? I checked if any room was available. Just one. Room 603. "An overnight stay, please," said the man, and handed me 50,000 won without asking the price, as if he knew it already. I debated if I should give them room 603, but having taken his money already, I just gave them the key. I took out a mop to wipe out the water they dripped behind, and then I noticed those drops were a bit too dark to be just rainwater. They seemed like blood? As I washed the mop in the toilet afterwards, the water ran indeed red. Then a call from room 603. "Front desk here, how may I help you?" I said.
Help me.
I didn't understand clearly at first, as she whispered as if she was making a secret call. She carried on with a desperate tone.
Help me. He's gonna kill me. Save me, please.
What the F was going on? On top of the drops of blood I had just wiped out, chills ran down my spine. But before I could respond anything, the line went dead. I was stuck there for a few seconds, but quickly rang an emergency line and explained the situation. They said they'd send police in 5 minutes. 5 minutes, when a woman was about to be killed any second now. I was still young, naive, and so braver. I picked up the mop for a weapon and went up to 6th floor. Through the hallway to room 603 were drips of watermarks, looking bloody as before. I put my ear to the room door. The door was thin enough for me to hear noises from the other side. Loud noises from the TV, and, in between those, muted thumping sound, as if somebody was stabbing something repeatedly. I tightened my grip of the mop and opened the door with a master key, quietly. The light was off in the room, but still bright enough from the TV screen. And in that flashing light I saw the man sitting on top of the woman. He was holding something with both of his hands, and struck down the woman's chest with it time after time. What he was holding was a knife. The whole bed was already soaked in scarlet, and the woman didn't move at all, seemingly already dead. The man finally stopped his almost mechanical stabbing motion and turned to look at me. His eyes were gleaming white with madness. Well, guess I was mad enough by then too, and rather than running away, I yelled, "You bastard!" I walked in with a mop aiming forwards. The man jumped off the bed and ran to the bathroom. There was no lock on bathroom doors in that motel, so I kicked the door with my might, shrieking like an animal. The door banged to the wall loudly. But there was nobody in the bathroom. I turned on the light and looked around, but he wasn't there. There was no window, and the ventilation hole was not bigger than my hand. I checked the bathroom behind the door and even flipped a towel that was hanging. But there was nobody. What the? But I remembered the woman and hurried out of the bathroom. And she wasn't there either. The bed was still stained with scarlet blood, but the woman was gone. My hand must have gone limp despite of myself. I just heard a loud clash of the mop hitting the floor. Have I gone mad? Was I hallucinating? But look at that, all the blood. I poked the blood-soaked mattress to make sure it wasn't hallucination. My finger became tainted red indeed. To my ears, suddenly the sound from the TV rang strangely clearly. It was a news report.
Huge crowd climbed mountains to enjoy the red and yellow autumn colors.
Autumn colors? But it was in the middle of summer monsoon season. Before I could think anything further, I heard a rattling noise from the bathroom. I turned to look inside. The man was there, looking into the mirror. His suit was soaked with blood, and both his hand and the knife he was holding were dripping with blood too. His face, looking at his own reflection, was that of a devastation. Then he slowly lifted the knife to his throat. His eyes rolled and met my reflection on the mirror. His hand stopped for a second to give me a faint smile, and slashed himself. Blood shot out like a fountain, and the man fell on his knees. Thank God I finally fainted at that point. I was woken up by the police I called in. They went straight up to the room 603, having found the front desk empty, and found me there, unconscious. I asked the police and asked again if there wasn't anybody in the room, a woman of such and such look, and a man of such character. But they confirmed there wasn't anything. No woman, no man, and no blood-soaked bed. No light was on in the room, the TV was off. Just me fainted, and the mop fallen next to me. Except for the dark reddish stain on my finger. The police left, and I spent the rest of my shift crouched behind the desk. I called my boss in the morning and just said I could not work for him anymore. He kept silent a while and said,
"So, you saw it there too?"
He later explained to me 4 years ago, a man in his 40s killed a woman in his 20s, and then killed himself by slashing his throat. The man was married and they were having a secret affair, but when the woman decided to leave him, he wasn't willing to let her go. He dragged her to the motel by threat and force, and killed both of them in room 603. Boss consoled me with extra pay, and in later days called in a shaman to perform a ritual in the room too. And well, I stayed there. It wasn't easy to find so easy and well-paid work after all. Just under one condition: that room 603 should never ever be offered to anybody. For a time I was mad about going fishing in the sea. In the olden days, when the marine life was rich around the coast, one could just draw the fishing rod from the breakwater and could still score a beautiful sea bream. But now anglers have to go further and further out to the sea. Current fashion is to take a boat to a rocky reef or small unmanned island to fish there. With the fishing industry in decline, some captains with small boats would make it a firm side business to commute anglers out to such spots. It's actually a very dangerous activity. Some reefs have a steep cliff 10-12 meters straight to the sea, while others could go completely underwater at high tide. In such a case, anglers are literally betting their life on the punctuality of the captain. And yet, some hardcore anglers would go out to such a reef or island with a tent and just fish on for days, all alone in the middle of the sea, apart from his captain bringing the regular supplies. This is of course illegal due to its obvious risk, but it's still an open secret between anglers and captains because, after all, police can't possibly patrol around all the reefs and islands dotted around. Anyway, one October day, I went out to Wido for fishing. I made a stop at the local fishing shop, basically the assembly point of anglers and captains, and heard somebody moaning at the back room of the shop. I asked the shop owner about it, at which his face turned dark instantly. He simply said it was Mr. Kim. I knew him too. A man in his 50s, he was notorious as a hardcore angler who would live out in the sea for weeks on end. We did drink together on a couple of occasions too. I stopped by the back room to see what happened to him. He wasn't himself, with his eyes sunk deep in the shadow. I first thought he must have been drinking too much, which was obvious judging by the smell of alcohol filled in the room. But why was he shivering and moaning then? I didn't get any response from him, so I asked the shop owner again. Apparently Mr. Kim had been in that state for a week. He came by 2 weeks ago to stay put in one of his favorite islands to fish. But then, when his captain stopped by a week later to hand over the regular supplies, Mr. Kim wasn't himself already. He jumped on the boat, leaving all his beloved fishing rods, equipment, and tent behind. And since then, he wouldn't come out of the room, just emptying bottles all day long. Anyway, just so happened, the police raided the port that day, and the captain who was to bring me out to the sea was caught for some violation. After some drama and scenes of arguments about refunds and ruined day, only I and another middle-aged angler were left in the shop. I had no reason to hurry back home anyway, so suggested to have a drink together instead. And when we opened the bottle, Mr. Kim sneaked in, joining us. He seemed a bit more lucid now, and I could finally hear what he experienced on the island. The island he went to was a golden spot, and indeed he fished up quite a few big ones. But the weather turned for worse into the evening, so he wrapped it up and withdrew into his tent. It was still early in the evening and the moon hadn't even risen yet. And in that dusk, he heard weird noises below the cliff. He wondered if it might be some poo-poos and looked down the cliff and saw several people walking southwards across the sea. The island was sitting good 10-meter deep water already, and there was no way people could casually walk over the water. But there they were. Soon there were more of them, many, many more of them. Some 100 people were walking against the grey low sky and agitated sea. Some were marching on, some were staggering, others were looking back as if not wanting to go. Men, women, a couple in hand, even some kids following their parents. Mr. Kim was of course deeply shocked, but thought he was just hallucinating. After all, older generations used to say not to look at the night sea too long, otherwise one might see something one is not supposed to see. He gave himself a slap and cleared his throat loudly to snap himself out. But at the noise, the people on the sea turned to look at his direction, and then started climbing up the cliff. There was no way to run away on that isolated island. Mr. Kim ran into his tent and just closed his eyes and covered his ears. Nevertheless, he couldn't block the sound of numerous hands rubbing across the tent and telling him,
Come on, Come with us.
Come with us. Come with us.
Join us.
Come
with us.
join us.
All he could do was shivering and pleading to save him before he eventually passed out. When he got up, it was already morning. He thought to pack up, but his body wouldn't move. He just emptied all the soju he brought with, waiting for the boat to come back. But even back on the shore, he heard those voices calling for him. Come on, come with us. And so he had to drown it with more soju thus far. When Mr. Kim finished his long monologue, I and the other angler didn't know what to respond, until the fishing shop owner broke the silence with a dark face.
The day you saw the ghost of the sea, wasn't it October 10th? You know what happened that day a few years ago? It's the day the West Sea ferry sank.
Yes, the accident that killed 292, many of which were hobby anglers. I had this wild yet intricate dream. In the dream, I was traveling by myself in the wild, somewhere that seemed like in Australia. I walked along the road, carrying a backpack, taking photos of the landscape. Then, with a screech of a short stopping of a car, I lost consciousness. When I got around again, I was thrown off behind a bush. I must have been hit by a car, and the driver seemed to have hid my body behind a bush. And there, I died. The spirit of me was still thinking like a living person, how my family back in Korea would be worrying about me, how I missed my pet dog. It was so sad that I didn't even have a chance to say my last goodbyes to the people I loved. I stood by the motorway, hoping some passerby might see me and retrieve my body and send it back to my family. A month passed, but most didn't even seem to be able to see that I was there. Few who did see me seemed to get terrified and drove away like mad. As desperate as I was, I didn't want to pursue them too hard. I think I instinctively knew that I would be passing a certain point of no return should I harm a living person for my own purpose. Then a man in his 20s saw me. Unlike others, he seemed to be too shocked to speed away, but almost stopped short. I thought this was my chance, so hopped on the back seat of his car. He was absolutely terrified and chanted all the way,
That can't be true. I'm just hallucinating. It's not there. It's not there.
But I just sat there till he got his home. At his place, I kept myself low as not to terrify him further, and just appeared when he went to bed. I pinned him down, I guess he must have experienced it as a sleep paralysis, and told him who I was, where my body was, and that I wanted to go back to Korea. I repeated time after time, both in Korean and English. But shit, he didn't understand what I said. He just cried pathetically with terror. So, I stopped the night terror method. Nevertheless, he still was my only hope. All he needed to do was find my body out and send it to Korea, and then I would leave him alone. With that singular hope, I hung around him for a good half a year. Even he got used to my presence because I didn't do any particular harm. And in the time, I learned the guy was a total loser and a walking mishap, constantly running into little accidents and mistakes. So, unwittingly, I started playing his guardian angel, saving him from all those accidents. He gradually got confident and successful, and seemed to trust me more and more, but not as a wholesome entity, but more like his own lucky charm. In any case, the more he trusted me, the more my power of influence grew. By then I could move things as I liked, like a poltergeist. 5 years passed, and the guy now had a good job, got married, and led a happy life, while I was getting more and more frustrated. I hoped, since I helped him out so much, he would play some Ouija board, seek a medium or whatever to try to communicate with me. But no, not at all. I was just a dubious but essential lucky charm for his own good. One night, out of frustration, I was mumbling to myself next to him, sleeping. He seemed to finally have picked up, "I want to go home." And after all these years, asked me for the first time,
"Where's your home?"
Oh my, that excitement I felt! Or so I should have felt that moment. But after years as a ghost, all the human emotions have already dried up in me. The only thing I could truly feel was pain. Anyway, I hurriedly told him all, how I died, where my body should be. Please send me back to my family. Haven't I helped you out enough to grant my wish now? But I could see what he was thinking.
God, that's far away. So much of a hassle too. And I'd better keep you next to me.
I got angry, but hoped one day he would change his mind, and hung around another 5 years. Now he became a father. And one day I was hit by a grave sense that my parents back in Korea had just passed away. Unlike me hanging around as a ghost, they seemed to have passed on to the underworld peacefully. And that meant I would never be able to see them again. I waited too long. I took my time too long, all because of this ungrateful bastard. With a growing sense of loss and rage, I turned into an evil. Now I could not even feel pain. The only thing left in me was hate towards the guy. I didn't have a reason to exist anymore. Now nobody would love me again. Nobody would remember me. All because of him. I first killed his wife. Even in the dream, I could feel the sense of excitement and fulfillment after I crushed her to bits. The guy bewailed at me why I didn't prevent it this time, but I just laughed and hissed. Except he, so taken by grief, didn't seem to realize I was laughing for the first time in our 10 years of our life together. I hid myself away from him, suppressing my growing excitement in anticipation of destroying everything valuable for him. Next target were his parents. I used my trick to have them win a free travel deal, and on their trip I trapped his father in the indoor barbecue to give him a slow, suffocating death, while I pulled his mother to the deep end of the pool to drown her. I jumped around with joy for my achievement. The guy called out for me in despair, but I kept hiding and just laughed at his grief and suffer behind his back. I was already excited about my next target, his daughter.
I lured and teased his neighbor's dog and got it bit away the little girl's throat in the plain sight of her dad. She died with the blood spewing out from her throat like a fountain. I was so overjoyed that I could not even think to hide myself from him anymore. I just laughed, jumped, and danced around with all the ecstasy I felt. Now you know my pain too, don't you? Having lost everything? He was now half mad and just stayed inside. I was happy to see him in that state, but got a bit bored having nothing more to take away from him. I just kept pestering around him, pushing my giggling face right up to his. One day he tried to talk to me, but I couldn't care less. I just kept whispering, "It's all your fault, it's all your fault," and danced around him. In the end, he seemed to decide something. He took a rope and a chair and hung himself. I just thought it all came to the justful end and danced around, at one point even on all fours, not being able to contain my excitement. When his body stopped struggling and gone limp, suddenly all emotions washed away from me. The deep realization came upon me was, now I would be left here just like this, all alone and with no purpose, forevermore. I pushed my face right up to the guy's face one last time and looked into his now hazy and lifeless eyes. And then I woke up. I'm quite stirred by this dream. The whole arc of emotional journey I went through was so vivid, and I still remember the poor guy and his family's faces. Could this be really how a lost spirit turns into an evil?
I'm in the last year of vocational school. As usually is the case, I found an apprenticeship at a middle-sized company. It was a big deal for me. It might not only pave the first stone towards my future career, but also, provided I managed to keep my position for 4 years, it would also substitute the mandatory military service. All great. Except a mate from the same school got a post there too. I'll call him Kim for the sake of the story. I already disliked Kim from the school. He had a wild imagination and would talk of his fantasies as if they were facts. On contrast, I'm more of a type that sticks to proven fact. Basically, we were on natural clashing course, and we already had history of hot arguments and fights. But as I said, the apprenticeship is a big deal for me, and I didn't want the clash become an issue at work. I really tried to oppress my frustration whenever Kim went on with the BS as usual, and calmly explained to him what the actual facts were. My friends teased me that I grew the patience of a saint. But looking back, I should rather have just ignored Kim entirely. I won't explain what happened exactly, but Kim's blubbing snowballed into a serious problem at work. So serious that our school teachers came to visit the company, and even education ministry got involved. My anger and frustration about Kim knew no bound at that point. I found a quiet corner in the storage and made sure there was no one around, and vented out. Ah! Effing Kim, you son of a bitch, just die out of my life! When I turned around to go back to my position, there he was, none other than Kim, staring at me. It totally caught me off guard that I yelled out the F word despite of myself. Caught red-handed, I didn't know what to say or act. Did he hear what I said? He must have. He must. Kim just stared at me without a word. The silence in that moment was so heavy that it almost felt suffocating. Kim then just turned around and walked out of the storage. I called out his name, but he didn't even bother to stop. Brief intention to apologize was quickly overtaken by fresh anger. He was the one that caused all the trouble, and why should I apologize? I yelled, "Suit yourself, you piece of shite!" Kim stopped. Curse my temper. Love him or hate him, Kim was bound to be my colleague for the next 4 years. I mumbled something again in attempt to apologize, and Kim slowly turned around to look at me. But no, it was just his head that was turning. I heard his neck bone break ringing in the quiet hallway, face perfectly expressionless all the while, and it still didn't stop. The head kept turning. Skin around the neck stretched and wrung until it eventually ripped with bursting blood. It still didn't stop, and the head fell off from the body and rolled all the way till it hit my feet. Kim's face was now smiling wide, showing all his teeth. Okay, I did see some ghosts when I was little and had to seek help from a shaman and so on. But this was nothing like the shadow figures I saw then. Kim's crazy smile, the skin about his neck ripped and mangled like a burst overripened tomato. They were so real, just like real. Every cell in my body screamed to get out, but my body didn't respond until I heard a footstep approaching. It finally shook me out of the frozen state, and I screamed. I never knew I could be so loud. It's not even a big company, but I was later told that everybody in the office on the second floor heard me too. Before I realized it, everybody was surrounding me with surprised faces. I found myself collapsed on the floor, and Kim's head was nowhere to be seen. My direct boss asked me what was wrong, and that was the first time I saw normally dismissive him so worried. My ripping scream must have wrecked my vocal cords, that I coughed out some blood, and the manager of the company took me to a hospital. Later I heard Kim was working in his post all the while this was going on. It was a particularly busy day at his department apparently, and he never left the post. My doctor, a psychologist, didn't believe what I recounted, of course. His focus was if I didn't take any substance or something, which, for hell, I have never ever. On my boss's recommendation, I took a week-long sick leave. And when I came back to work 7 days later, I heard Kim died. 2 days prior, the manager was the first one to arrive at the company. Before he sat down at his desk, he heard a loud thud. When he got out to check, he found Kim down at the bottom of staircase hall, his head crushed on the marble floor. When the police later checked on the record of the surveillance camera, it showed Kim walk up the stairs, then stopped to look down and throw himself down. It was a shock to everybody. Kim's parents believed it must be because Kim was bullied and made a big show at the company, and our normally butchy boss was so shaken that he had to seek therapy. And just now, I finished my shift and was resting, and I got a call from the manager. He asked me if I hung around on the ground floor earlier during my shift. Well, I didn't. My position is on the second floor, and I had no business on the ground floor until the lunch time. And then the manager explained.
You see, I was smoking by the parking lot outside, and I saw you staring at me from the window of the packing office on the ground floor. It was definitely you. You just gave me a look and quietly turned away. I mean, it's just considering what happened recently. I wanted to make sure if everything is all right,
he said. Now I'm shaken. I'm scared if I would not turn out like Kim for whatever reason. On the day I saw Kim's head breaking off, what made me scream out loud was not the sight of his head. It was to whom the approaching footstep belonged. It wasn't my boss, the manager, the line leader, or Miss Lee. It was me. I saw me walking backwards with my head turned back to stare back at me. That was why I screamed desperately. I'm scared now.
It's a story a teacher recounted in school. His hometown was not far from a nearby city, but his neighborhood itself was still more or less like a countryside village. Among the neighbors was a 20-something-year-old woman who was a bit mentally challenged. She looked perfectly normal, but her mind seemed to stuck in her childhood. She was still rather pretty and good-natured, so her parents seek to arrange the marriage with a guy with a disability too. But then her behavior changed from when, and her belly started swelling. Yes, she was pregnant. Her family was shocked and asked the young woman, but her incoherent mind failed to remember what really happened. They suspected the fiancé, but he strongly denied too. Usually in such a case, they would have chosen to end the pregnancy, but they were so convinced that her fiancé was the father, and because a paternity test would be possible only when the baby was born, the family let the woman have the baby. But when the baby was born and the test was taken, the fiancé was not the father. The desperate family created a little stir in the village by asking the neighbors for a hair or spit sample in effort to track down the culprit. But none of theirs matched. It was the woman's mother who also discreetly submitted samples from her own family too. And it turned out the father of the baby was the woman's grandfather. And that wasn't even the end of the shock and scandal. Apparently the old man was initially very enthusiastic about collecting samples from the village guys because he knew one of them should be the father of the baby. He had been pimping out his own granddaughter to the guys in the village. He himself also took an advantage of his imbecile granddaughter, but he assumed he should be too old to father a baby, especially among all the other guys. My teacher doesn't know what exactly happened afterwards. It didn't seem that the family pursued any legal action against their own patriarch, and they just moved away, while equally guilty villagers chose not to talk about it at all. Grandpa never talked about it till the day he died, clearly traumatized with the memory. I could piece things together this much only because of what Grandma recounted sporadically after Grandpa passed away. Grandpa was born and grew up in the northern Gangwon province. When the US and Soviets split Korea after World War II, his hometown fell on the Soviet side. With about 30 or so fellow neighbors, he decided to move over to the south of the new border. They found a little plot of land between two mountains just shy of the border to the north. It was not big, but surprisingly fertile. They formed a hamlet there. Soon other wanderers came and joined too, and it became a village, small, remote, but lucrative and peaceful. 12 years passed. One day an old Buddhist monk came by. The village by then was pretty comfortable, and they treated the monk kindly and donated handsomely to this rare visitor from the outside world. The monk accepted them graciously. Then he sat in the middle of the village and fell into deep meditation for the entire morning. When he got up again, he went straight to the village leader's house and loudly asked to talk to the leader. The leader invited the monk in, and their talk carried on over an hour. When the leader came out from the long talk, his face looked dark and serious. He called for all the guys in the village over 40 and passed on what the monk told him. According to him, the land they founded their home had been uninhabited for 700 years. It used to be a dense forest and had to stay that way, but the interwoven karma turned it into this habitable plot. But contrary to the friendly surface, the land actually belonged to demons, not the usual spirits with grudge or vengeful ghosts of dead people. These were true evil from the hell that entirely belonged to a different dimension than that of humans. They were seething now because humans took over their territory, but could just watch on because they had been sealed all this time. But soon was coming the day the seal should expire, and that day was now due in a month. Villagers had to start packing up right away and leave within that time, otherwise not a single soul would survive the bloody storm that was to come. For the people who already lost their home once, that was a terrible news. The monk put his hands together to the distraught people and said,
"I've already stirred up the karma by spilling the heavens' business. It's only for your kindness and earnesty that I couldn't keep silent."
He then took off the long string of beads around his neck and handed it to the village leader with a few sheets of paper with the bizarre drawings on them.
"These will protect you from the harbinger of the disaster while you prepare to leave this place. But they won't do any more once 1 month is up. So please, hurry yourselves."
The monk then turned around and started to go. Suddenly the village leader darted towards him and dropped in front of the old monk.
Please have mercy on us. We've already lost home and
family once and barely started to settle down here. We have nowhere else to go and nobody to turn to. Please."
Seeing a man well over 60 crying and begging like a child, all the other villagers also surrounded the monk and begged on their knees. Old monk bit his lips and thought for a long time.
I don't have many years left on earth. Maybe I have nothing much left to fear for breaking yet more rule of the heaven.
Then he prescribed the village a solution that sounded most bizarre. A month from now, the evils would get freed from the seal, and the first sign of it would be the red moon. When that day come, every kids under 10 should be gathered at 1 in the morning around the holy tree at the center of the village. They should circle around the tree, hand in hand and eyes firmly closed. If they manage to stay that way, not letting each other's hands go, not uttering a single word, and not opening their eyes till the dawn break, then the evils should be sealed back for another 700 years. But if not a soul should see the morning sun alive again. The village leader opened his mouth to say something, but the monk took out a dagger and cut his pinky. He let the pumping blood from the cut finger spray on the holy tree, chanting what sounded like a spell. Everybody's face turned pale watching the scene. The monk then ripped a strip off from his cloak, wrapped up his wound, and finally left the village.
"Don't forget what I told you,"
was his last word. The countdown began for the villagers. The village leader handed a string of beads and talismans from the monk to my grandpa, who was then a tall and burly young man, to guard them with his life. Kids under 10 was summoned and was trained and instructed to the monk's recipe. Kids under 10 are bound to be unruly, but stern shouts and spanks from the adults, and above all, the sheer desperation in the air, seemed to train them surprisingly quickly into their unlikely ritual. Every night from 1 o'clock to the dawn, kids had to sit around the holy tree, hand in hand and eyes closed shut. Adults beat drums and made creepy screeches around the children and made sure they did not react, move, or speak, or open their eyes, no matter what. Meanwhile, my grandpa had to suppress his growing anxiety. What an unthinkable task people were charging onto the kids. Wouldn't it be better that they just left the village? Weeks leading to the D-Day, unholy omens started occurring, adding to the growing anxiety. Many livestock like cows, chicken and dogs died for no reason. Even flies and mosquitoes that should have been an inevitable nuisance given it was midsummer just disappeared. Hoping to find help, they even invited in a famous shaman from a bigger town, but she barely took a look at the holy tree standing at the center of the village and said,
"Your village is sitting on the hell. My God can't help you,"
and just left. A month passed. The moon rising shone bloody red from the early evening. Children were summoned around the holy tree as rehearsed for many nights, and the rest of the village people locked themselves in their houses. But my grandpa couldn't just sit and wait to see what happens.
the enormous sense of foreboding and impending sure death he couldn't ignore. He grabbed a string of beads and talismans he was entrusted to and ran to the mountain behind the village. A dog saw him and followed, but couldn't further past the village boundary as if there was an invisible force trapping it in. That only made Grandpa more scared, and he ran his might away from the village. And when he barely reached the top of the mountain, screams and cries of beasts, chilling laughters, and sound of destruction rang around. The horrific sounds that didn't seem to belong to this world terrified Grandpa so much that he passed out. When he got around, drizzly rain was falling on him. He wanted to run away, but guilty conscience stopped him. He ran back towards the village to the point where he could get an overview. The big holy tree was split in half and was charred black as if struck by a lightning. It was covered with pieces of flesh and was bleeding red in the rain. All the houses in the village were collapsed in. Grandpa collapsed and screamed like a madman, but even in that overwhelming emotion, he sensed a weird energy emitting around, and he hurriedly ran away to the farthest place from the village. Grandpa settled down in Jeju Island off the southern coast and never left it for the rest of his life. He never talked about his old village to anybody except to his wife. When Grandma talked about the account after Grandpa passed, of course, we all brushed it off as an old wives' tale. But as the oldest aunt cleared up the house after Grandma passed away, she found a few sheets of papers with weird drawings on them, clearly yellowed with age. Winter 2012. I was 30 then, and just diagnosed with cerebral infarction. I was still young, but that was not the first time I had issues with my body. From head to neck to lung to arm to knee, always on my right side. This time too, it was my right brain that was dying away. Was it all a coincidence? What about the frequent accidents I experienced from an early age? Just as an example, when I was 5, I used to join Grandma on her way to her church. By the time we were back from the service, it was invariably in the dusk. Then one day, I was hit by a motorbike. Probably because I was young and flexible, I didn't get hurt too much. Then, in the following week, on the same way back from church, I was hit by the same motorbike. Coincidence? What is the chance of it happening in the 3rd week then? On the 4th week, I learned my lesson and made sure to walk well on the edge of the road, and fell into the gutter head first and almost died, were it not for Granny promptly pulling me up by my feet. And that is just one example. My life had been riddled with accidents. A stone fell from nowhere, broke my right knee. My right lung collapsed while I was just quietly working at the desk. Occasions like I was almost drowned or beaten nearly to death by school colleagues are too numerous even to mention. But this time felt differently. So far, even in the worst cases, I always felt there was some force, a guardian angel for the lack of a better word, was there to save me at the last minute. But this time, even the guardian angel wouldn't be able to save my dying brain. I prepared myself for the end. I gave my notice to my work and still did my best to the last day to hand over my jobs smoothly. Strangely, I was more worried about leaving my girlfriend behind than my parents. She was really naive and ever-positive gal, and I worried how to let her down gently, and how she was going to deal with the cruel world when I be gone. I couldn't tell her about my diagnosis, nor I was preparing my end. One evening I met her. She was ever bright and ever smiley. After the usual date, I gave her a lift back home, but then thought, well, shouldn't I give her a drive around one more time, since she didn't drive? I called her again and suggested that we take our usual night drive route to the nearest beach. Time was already passing midnight. That night the road was eerily empty. I didn't want music banging in my ear, so we drove in silence. Even normally chatty girlfriend was just fiddling her phone. The route must have been the same, but it felt strange. Had the navigation took us to a different road? Or was it the fog? Or was it my brain? But what disturbed me the most was the weird, metallic grating noise. The last section of the road to the beach is pretty straightforward. When I reached that straight stretch of the road, the fog dissipated, and I could speed up a little. The grating noise returned. Maybe something was up with the car, but I decided to drive to the beach anyway. The midnight sea was under the veil of fog. Still, it was sea, and for once I became the bright and carefree one, walking up and down and making jokes like, "A ghost might pop out," while girlfriend quietly looked ahead over the water. She was behaving so different from the girl I've known for 10 years, but I guess I was too preoccupied to notice anything. The gusts from the winter sea was so cold that we couldn't stay there for a long time anyway. As I took the way back, grating noise returned. Should I bring the car to the garage tomorrow? Was the last normal thought I had. And the rest followed in an instant. I saw something ahead. Something was standing taller than the holiday cottage on the beach. A figure clad in black hooded cloak. It wasn't of this world. It wasn't something I could fight against or deal with. It was beyond anything I had ever imagined or saw in my worst nightmare. That I was terrified wouldn't cut it. I was overwhelmed. I was helpless. I was paralyzed. I couldn't even lift my foot off the accelerator, and my car just ran to that enormous presence. I could barely squeak to girlfriend through my parched throat, though what I wanted to say was, "Look at that!" The metallic grating got louder and more intense, and I saw girlfriend lifting her head from my peripheral vision. She pushed her head right up to my ear and said, "You saw it just now?" I couldn't even turn to look at her. Car was going to crush into that black force the next second, and the metallic grating was deafening. It was just then. A whitish figure that resembled a person jumped in onto the road from the side. I hit that figure, and only then I stepped on the brake. The dull thud of something hitting the car, sharp screech of the car stopping short. I just put my head over the wheel and cried. It wasn't something I could take. I couldn't see, hear, or say anything. No, rather, I didn't dare to see what should be awaiting for me. I cried and cried like a helpless little boy. What else could one do when one was seized by something so beyond comprehension? After crying like that for a long time, I finally picked myself up. I got off the car, wiping my tears. I looked around. There was nothing but the cold winter night air. Not that giant black thing on the road, nor that white figure that I hit. I walked all the way round and over the guardrail too. There was nothing. Finally, I came back to car. And there was nothing either. My girlfriend wasn't there. I moved the car to the shoulder and just shivered till the morning came. Even though I couldn't find any proof of crash, my car bore damage. The right side bumper, right side headlight, and the right side hood. Just like my body, only the right side was damaged. As for my girlfriend, she didn't join my nocturnal drive at all. She was home, deep in a sleep. I still don't understand anything of what happened that night. Was any of it true? All I know is I survived it, and I am still alive. My uncle was born in 1956. I hear he was a natural-born swimmer. In his teens, he won in various swimming competitions, even on international level, but he had to give up the professional career because his father passed away untimely and he had to support the family. But water called for his name, and he chose Navy to serve his military service. There he got to learn underwater wet welding. It led to a job at a big shipbuilding yard in Busan, where he met his future wife. By 1980, the couple settled in Jeju Island, the wife's hometown. A young skilled diver was in high demand for various salvage or underwater constructions, and uncle could lead busy but comfortable life there. Between the beach and dock in that village was big rock and reef formed around it. It provided an ideal environment for various sea lives, so it was a popular spot for hobby anglers. One day, 2 anglers who took the spot for a night fishing went missing. Tragic, but night fishing does come with high risk. But when another angler drowned at the same spot just a few days later, and a weird rumor went around as of what happened, the villagers started to get uncomfortable. Apparently, a group of anglers had a drink on that big rock in the middle of the reef. One of them then went up to the edge of the rock to pee and just walked straight into the sea. Others first just laughed, but the man in the sea screamed and swam deeper into the sea. A couple of other anglers jumped in to catch him, but they seemed to panic at something in the water too, and swam back to the rock in no time, while the first angler disappeared into the sea. His body was found the following day. His mouth was stuffed with what looked like a long black hair. Accidents happen, but such a weird case was unheard of. When a haenyeo went missing in a matter of another month, and even the diver who was tasked to search for her went missing, the whole village got nerves. A haenyeo, literally a sea woman, is a female diver who professionally collects various sea life such as abalone or sea urchin from the seabed. These women are masters of free diving and can go down as deep as 15 meters and stay there for minutes without any equipment. It's of course a hard and risky work, but the generations-old experience taught them how to keep themselves safe. In fact, it's very, very rare to lose a haenyeo to the sea, so the missing haenyeo was considered so much more unsettling a news in the village. Bad news continued. Another angler went missing, and hobby anglers started to avoid coming to the village. About the same time, the amount of catch fell drastically too. For the village where the main livelihood was fishing and catering hobby anglers, it was a huge and deep blow. Desperate village elders invited a shimbang, Jeju dialect for a shaman. The shimbang, a middle-aged woman with her grey hair in a clean updo, stood at the beach and glared towards the sea for a while.
It feels suffocating even from here. This is not just any old thing,
she said, more to herself. Back at the village leader's house, she reported,
I thought I've seen enough of evil spirits, but that thing in the sea, it's something else altogether. Even my granny god hid herself from the poisonous presence. It too must have once been a human soul, but by now it has turned into a bottomless malice.
So, what should we do about it?
The village leader said.
Normal rituals wouldn't work. It has long lost its former human memory and soul. It doesn't even have a form of resentment or grudge, but a blind desire to kill. I don't think one can negotiate or appease to it.
Where's such a cursed thing from? Why suddenly in our village?
It must have been here for a long time, dormant. I don't know exactly how, but something must have triggered it to wake up.
Please help us. We'll do whatever you suggest.
We can't negotiate with it. We can't banish it either. The only thing we can try is to seal it back off,
Shimbang said. Her ritual lasted for 5 days at ebb tide. At the end of it, she wrapped up all the tools used during the ritual with silk threads and sunk them in the sea.
Is that it? Are we safe now?
Village leader said.
I can't guarantee it. We won't be safe if anybody happens to wake it up again. So don't let anybody access to that rock and the reef,
Shimbang said. So people stuck rebars painted red around the reef to block the access, and nothing untoward happened anymore. Peaceful days returned to the village, and 4 years passed. One day, Uncle's father-in-law told him,
You see, last week I was on the boat out to the sea and heard something weird sound like a female voice, almost like a scream. And then I didn't think about it, but on the way back the same evening, I heard it again. It instantly gave me chills, made me nauseous too. I don't feel good about it. You should be extra careful when you work.
Uncle didn't think too much about it. Probably it was just a trauma from the past instant, he thought. A few days later, it was a grey, rainy day in October. Uncle was out to secure the facilities of the fishery before the typhoon that was forecasted to land late that same night. On the way back, the motor of the boat stopped before it reached the dock. The propeller must have got tangled up with a fishing net, as it sometimes happened. Mr. Cole, Uncle's companion, dived in the sea to check on it. But it seemed to take longer than usual. Uncle on the boat nervously looked around and caught the sight of rebars painted red around the rock. Why did it look so much more eerie than usual that day? Then, with the bubbles, Mr. Cole came up on the surface finally.
What took you so long?
Uncle said.
I think it's not fishing net, but looks like a bunch of long hair,
Mr. Cole said. But that's not possible. It should be some sort of seaweed.
I don't know. Never seen any seaweed like that. Anyway, hand me a pair of shears.
Sure you can deal with it?
What do you take me as? Fresh?
Mr. Go teasingly scoffed and went under the water with the shears. And he never came up again. Uncle dived in himself to search, but there was no trace of Mr. Cole. Uncle had to call for help, and another boat came to tow his boat back to the dock. Soon a search for Mr. Go went ahead, but had to stop soon because the sea was getting wilder as the typhoon approached. Uncle was going mad. Mr. Go was the first person who helped him when he first settled in the village, and he had been the most loyal friend ever since. If they didn't find Mr. Go before typhoon, he would be lost forever. At 10 at night, the heavy rain momentarily turned to drizzle and wind to breeze. Uncle took up basic snorkeling gear and torch and headed to the beach without telling anybody. Rain started to get heavy again, and he couldn't really see anything. But Uncle carried on searching, thinking just a few more minutes, just a few more minutes. It was then that his torchlight caught the outline of what looked like a person about 8 meters under the sea. His heart sank, but took one big breath and dived towards it. It was a struggle to fight a current that was getting wilder and muddier by seconds. When he finally reached down, the body was standing straight up in the water, even in the wild current, with its head fixed downwards. Only its long hair were spread out in all directions and wiggled around as if they had life of their own. Uncle then realized the person must be at least twice as tall as an average adult man. Suddenly, a deafening, high-pitched voice rang. It sounded like the first breath out from a Henya, the sea woman, after minutes-long free dive. It's the technique the sea women developed over the generations to get rid of the accumulated carbon dioxide. They call it in Jeju Island sumbi sori, and is described to sound like a sharp whistle. And now it sounded just like that, but much louder.
Uncle looked around to find where it was from, and when he looked back at the weird body in the water, to his horror, it was wiggling to turn towards Uncle. The face was hidden behind the tentacles of hair, but it was definitely wearing the rainbow-sleeved hanbok, the traditional dress. Its twitching moves to sides was nothing like a normal diver's move. Uncle hurriedly swam back to the surface. Yet another deafening screech was heard. Uncle looked around, but couldn't see anybody, until one moment turned his head and found it face to face right in front of him. Its long hairs flew about in the wave and slapped Uncle's face in all directions.
"Don't disturb me,"
Uncle heard it saying. Uncle unwittingly gasped and inhaled a lot of seawater. Feeling burning pain down his airway, he desperately tried to swim away. But he couldn't move further. He reached down to his feet and felt long fingers and sharp nails tugging onto the flipper on his left foot. Uncle wiggled the flipper off from his foot and swam away. But in the wild sea, he couldn't tell his direction anymore. The torch flickered out, and the float he carried to mark his position was lost too. But he couldn't take his time. The waves were getting wilder, and it might catch him any moment now again. He just swam forward. He couldn't tell if he was breathing in air or water, and he couldn't feel his limbs, until his head hit something hard. He realized he swam right into the sharp rocks of the reef. It must have tore his head open, but ironically, the pain shook him up, and the presence of the reef finally helped him to regain the sense of direction. Indeed, in the pouring rain, Uncle could see the flickering lights from the village. He had to move fast before hypothermia set in or losing too much blood.
Please, please.
Uncle struggled to get his torch back on again, and thankfully it turned on again. But the first thing that revealed in the light was the forest of rebars painted red. He was right in the middle of the forbidden spot. He feared the wild waves and it in the water, but had no other choice but swim back to the shore. But before he could take off, the torchlight caught a sight about 5 meters off the reef. They were heads of people, a good few dozens of them, just above the surface of the water, and all facing Uncle away. In the wild sea, they didn't seem to sway even a bit. Even in that situation, Uncle couldn't take his eyes off from the most bizarre sight. But wait! That one! The shaved head with the long fat earlobes! It was Mr. Core that Uncle was desperately looking for.
Hey, it's me! Come home with me!
Uncle shouted. But Mr. Core didn't react. What replied was the screeching whistle that sounded even louder and much closer than before. He instinctively turned the torchlight towards it and faced it again in the water just off the reef. Only its upper body was visible, but it wasn't difficult to tell that its height was much bigger than any normal person. Its face was blue and bloated. On its forehead were many red spots. The droopy eyes on each end of abnormally wide glabella were so stretched downwards that they almost touched the cheekbones. Its long hairs were floating wildly, framing the face like a lion's mane, and in the center were glaring red eyes. At the end of its rainbow sleeves were long fingers and black nails. It was unmistakably the same thing that attacked back in the sea. Uncle froze on the spot. He couldn't dare to take his eyes off because he feared it might attack him again any second. He didn't know how long the confrontation lasted. His heart jumped so loud that he couldn't hear the wild waves. His heart panting breathed in the metallic smell from his blood-soaked bodysuit. He knew he couldn't stay on. It was just about 100 meters to swim to the shore. That was the only way to survive. He would jump in the sea at 3. 1, 2. His eyes left the sight of it a split second to check the direction to the village, and the next moment he felt a creepy, icy air, an indescribable stench right next to his cheek. With a scream, he just jumped into the sea. He just swam forward, despite the burning pain, blinded eyes, and shaky limbs. Oh, but all in vain. He felt his hands and feet getting tangled up by disgusting hair. This was it, he thought, and let himself wash away to the wave. Next thing he realized was he was dragged away, and his feet were touching the ground. Apparently, upon finding Uncle missing, some villagers came out to search for him, and miraculously found him floundering in the sea. He was sent to the emergency. His head needed to get stitched up, and all his 10 fingers were found to have suffered fractures. But the nightmare was not yet over for Uncle. Literally. Every night he had a dream of a clear sky and a calm sea. In the middle of the sea was Mr. Ko. As Uncle approached him, Ko's expression got more and more distorted, and the sky got darker. Mr. Ko stared at Uncle with resentment, and the moment he opened his mouth, it was back right up at Uncle with the malicious red eyes. As it laughed with its mouth wide opened, it revealed tangled hairs and scarlet gauze in the mouth. Uncle would invariably wake up while he was helplessly dragged into the deep abyss. A few days later, a surprising news arrived. That Mr. Ko was found on the beach. He was in a critical condition, but somehow still alive. When Ko recovered enough to be able to communicate, Uncle visited him, but apparently he didn't remember anything as of what happened, and nothing of the horrible things my uncle witnessed. That night, Uncle saw it in his dream once again. With a choked up voice by hair and gore, it said,
"I give you back what you were looking for you have survived me, but never come back. You won't be lucky twice."
Uncle took its warning seriously. He gave up his diving career and moved back to the mainland together with his family. After a few years, he got to hear a piece of news from the old village, that the shaman who sealed the evil water ghost went missing. The only thing she left behind were her shrine room all turned upside down and wet.